I'm at a place in my own healing journey where I've been learning more and more about the nervous system. You can only get so far in your healing journey if your nervous system is dysregulated. So I wanted to bring someone on the show to help us learn more about nervous system health. Lucy Oliver has established a whole wellness program where they help people restore their nervous system health through these awesome retreats. And in this episode, she's going to walk us through some things that we can start doing now to see improvement in our nervous system health and help us understand the serious health impacts if we don't. Welcome to the Daily Wellness Podcast. I'm your host, Melissa Meredith. I've led my family on a transformative health journey for over a decade, and now I help other families do the same. So this is a place where you can learn about healthy living and take the next step in your wellness journey. Hey, Daily Wellness listeners. Whether you are plant-obsessed or anxious to grow more of your own food, a greenhouse can help extend your plant collection and your growing season. I wanted to do both of those things, actually, and searched for a greenhouse that was both gorgeous and full of functional features. I found all that I needed and more in my greenhouse from Backyard Discovery. To see all three of their designs, visit the link in the show notes. I'll be sharing updates on social media as we get ours set up and filled over the next few months. Now back to the episode. Lucy, thanks for joining the Daily Wellness Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. Very happy to be here.
Yeah, I think for the conversation that we're going to have, it would be super helpful if you could just tell us a little bit about your journey, your health struggles, and what brought you to where you're at today.
Yes. Well, it's a long journey, filled with many years, which also leads to a lot of rewarding and growth in the process. So I had all sorts of physical and mental health conditions, starting with digestive issues from being very young. I just couldn't really digest food very well, and nobody really knew why. And I ended up hospitalized because I was getting like crazy amount of stomach cramps. And again, doctors couldn't really figure it out. They ran all sorts of tests. I was put into the IBS category of, well, it's just how it is forever. And it then developed into hormonal imbalances, like really severe, again, and passed along all of these specialists, and nobody really knew what was happening. They kind of gave their advice, some of which wasn't helpful at all, if probably more harmful. And then it just kind of escalated into more things that all linked. It tied into like an eating disorder, hypothyroidism, a huge amount of blood sugar dysregulation, and then crazy amounts of brain fog to the point of not feeling safe to drive, barely being able to function in daily lives, sleeping for 14 hours a night and still feeling exhausted, and just really be quite miserable. And knowing that I had to figure something else out. I wasn't getting help. I spent all the money I had on supplements, doctors, as many functional medicine wasn't really a thing back then, but naturopathic doctors, anyone, I would try anything, and just wasn't really getting anywhere. Fortunately, my background is in science. I went up to a master's level in chemistry, which then didn't seem particularly useful until I started going through all of these scientific papers and really just trying to figure out what was happening in my body, because just everything was completely off. So I just started to try and understand all the different systems of the body and how they connected, and what could be at the root of all of these symptoms. And it turned out for me, it was very severe nervous system dysregulation, which most probably happened from birth or birth, and it just affected me throughout my childhood and then, up until that point, adult life. And so all of the symptoms really correlated with those of a dysregulated nervous system. And so I just started looking into ways to help to regulate it better. And at the time, there wasn't that much information. Fortunately, it's becoming much more mainstream, which is fantastic. And that was really one of my motivating factors in wanting to start the company that I ran, Precision Health, which is all about providing information about the nervous system through education and also immersive experiences, just to really understand the brain and body better and how to create more coherence between them. And it's incredible just how little information in general we know. It just doesn't come up at any point in our lives. And so it's been really fascinating just to watch the guests come through and just things that now feel so obvious to me being in this space. It's like, oh yeah, that's actually groundbreaking for some people and just can absolutely transform how they perceive the symptoms that they have or how they go about their lives. So it's been such an incredible process to be able to share that and actually see transformational results in the guests that come through.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, first of all, I'm sorry that you had to go through all of that. I'm sure those are not really pleasant memories to think back on, but I love that you're using the struggles from your past to really help people now. That's such a beautiful thing. And since part of your story was related to your nervous system, I'd really like to talk about that because I think that the more I study health as well, the more I can see how important that aspect of our bodies and our health is. So can you just kind of give us an introduction to the nervous system? If people haven't put that much thought into it, like what is the big deal? What does it do? And all those things.
Yes, I think most people don't really know what it does or why it matters.
Yeah.
Basically, I would say it is when we're talking about mind-body connection, it is the connector. So the nervous system is made up of the brain, the brainstem, and then the whole peripheral nervous system, which touches all of the organs right up to your fingers and down to your toes. And basically, it's kind of this two-way information highway where all of the information from the brain goes up to the body, and then from the body, it goes back up to the brain through neurons. And so really, it's controlling a lot of what we do. It's kind of how we are sensing the world. And so the better we can actually regulate our nervous system, the better we can interact with the world. And so what we focus on at Rees is the autonomic nervous system, which is really doing a lot of the behind the scenes tasks. So we have the somatic nervous system that's more like voluntary movement, and then the autonomic nervous system's keeping your breathing in check. It affects your sleep. It's kind of regulating digestion, wound healing, like all of these things that you're not thinking about or really actively. I mean, you can actively change your breath, which we can come back to, but you don't have to constantly think about it to be able to stay alive and keep breathing. And so the autonomic nervous system is where we focus, because what we tend to see, I mean, in my case, and what we tend to see in our guests, is that the sympathetic branch of the nervous system, which is our kind of response to any kind of threat, that activation there's a bit of an epidemic of it being chronically activated. So really the goal of the nervous system in that sense, with regards to responding to threats, is to be able to pick up on a threat, so respond to it in whatever way, back in the day, it might involve running or some kind of physical movement, and then go back into the parasympathetic response, which is the relaxation, digestion, and healing response. And so we call it the term's already been coined, but we use it as sympathetic dominance, which is when we're just stuck somewhat in that sympathetic activated state. And so that's what a lot of people might have heard of as the fight, flight, freeze, or fawn state. And so it can take show up as many different symptoms and characteristics. And so part of what we do is really work to unwind that stress state and better understand how to get into the parasympathetic nervous system state and make that more of a default. And so just having that awareness of, well, when am I going into this state? What's causing me to be in that activated state? How do I get into the parasympathetic state? And how can I create more calm, peace, and kind of healing in my body is such a big piece of it, of that education.
Yeah. So if people are thinking, wanting to evaluate their own lives and think, maybe, is this a problem for me? Do I need to address this in my own life? Like, what kind of symptoms show up in people's lives that might be a clue that they need to work on regulating their nervous system?
So the more physical symptoms tend to be digestive issues, big one. So any kind of bloating, kind of IBS or SIBO symptoms, hormonal imbalance. It's just generally not a priority of the body to be focusing on sex hormones when there's a big threat happening. So let's see a significant hormonal imbalance. Cognitive impairment. So that can be brain fog or just responding a lot more from the primal brain, that more survival mode, very reactive, not really using a lot of the executive function. And fatigue, very common. It's basically just a giant energy leak when we're constantly in that fight threat response mode and we're not getting into the healing mode to be able to restore the energy. So fatigue is very, very common, along with some postural issues. So often like tight in the neck and upper back and often in the calves, because again, it's being primed to be able to run, to activate that flight mechanism. And then sleep issues. So again, can compound into the fatigue, but when it doesn't feel safe and we're in a hypervigilant state, it's very hard to sleep. And also, when we're in a stress response, basically from the brain, we can create this chain reaction responses in the body, which include producing adrenaline and cortisol. And so that shift in those patterns of our natural cortisol pattern, for example, can then cause sleep issues. So they're kind of the most common. And you can also get severe nervous system dysfunction in the form of like Alzheimer's and even stroke and epilepsy, which obviously has much more distinct symptoms. And then there's a lot of characteristics that come with that. For example, like flight can look like just keeping yourself busy all of the time. It's just like always, like we have to produce, I have to be doing something. It can look like flight, and the fawn is the people pleaser of really trying to be safe in the environment. Fight can come out as more of an aggression, reactivity. So there's a lot of traits that can tie into just wanting to like look under the surface and think, maybe there's something else going on here.
Yeah, that's really insightful. I mean, if you're talking about just digestive issues, sleep, and fatigue, just those things, like that's a big percentage of people.
Huge.
Yeah. Why do you think so many people are struggling with nervous system issues?
I think just the way we've been primed by society. I mean, even just looking back on my childhood growing up, the amount of pressure that was put on me for exams and, getting good grades, and it's kind of like life or death, like, oh my God, if I don't get that A, or I don't get into the school, or I don't get this. I mean, that in itself was just priming this overproducing, overachieving, kind of pressure house. And then going into the, adult world, a lot of the things we get applauded for are actually things that potentially could be dysregulating the nervous system. That kind of like hustle culture of just always going non-stop to create all of these things. We see now when we go into when we're looking at capitalism and more of like a recession type structure, everybody's struggling to just make ends meet. It does feel like survival. And so I think when you combine that also with technology, where we kind of disrupted our regular dopamine pattern, also our circadian rhythm with the blue light late at night, like all of these things that are just taking us out of really being human and how we're designed, how our operating system, our nervous system was designed to function. It can take a lot to try and actually build that into your life when you're just in our current society, which is it's kind of lost sight of what it means to be human. And also just how it's perceived to go and rest, to take a day off, to take that vacation. And that's a huge comment that comes up with the guests, is just how much it took for them to want to give something to themselves, because often we get the overgivers, which is the coping mechanism, but also to justify taking the time, to not be producing at work, to take time off from their responsibilities. It's just that sort of socio-cultural programming that part's hard to change. Obviously, it's a much bigger issue, but we can work to exist within that structure. It can be a little bit more challenging, but within that, just having more awareness and being able to use certain tools within that structure, it can create a profound impact on the nervous system.
Yeah, I agree. And that's a really good description of it. And I was recently listening to a lady tell her story of healing, and she had some not major health issues, but some minor things that she wanted to work on, like some hormone imbalance and better sleep and things like that. And she had just been trying all these things and didn't feel like she was making a lot of progress. all the things in the natural health and wellness world that she thought she should do. And it wasn't until she really started to address her nervous system health that she really started to see progress in other areas of her life. And she was kind of making the point that if you want to see progress in other areas of your health, that you can't ignore your nervous system. So I would just curious on your thoughts on that.
Yes, like I think we as a company believe that nervous system regulation is fundamental to physical and mental well-being. And I said before, the mind-body connection really is the nervous system. It's just all of our systems are so intertwined. And so when that messenger system is off, everything's going to be affected. And fortunately, a lot of this information is becoming much more mainstream. Hopefully, it'll be more accepted into the medical model. And I think we'll just realize how foundational it is. It's just it's just very hard to use, for example, just a supplement to fix a digestive issue when the message from your brain is actually slow down the peristalsis, which is the muscular movement of the gut. No supplement's going to fix that. And
right.
So key episodes when I see a lot, even some of the kind of biohacking gadgets, it's like, that's nice, but here's the whole, it's almost like the fine tuning, but when the foundation just isn't, it is unstable. And it's just more like, and some of these things, I mean, they don't cost anything to do. It just can be more challenging to make the lifestyle shift. It's much easier to take the pill. It's much easier to stand in front of the red light or do the whatever passive treatment. It's much harder to actually look inside, because most of the nervous system dysregulation that I've seen on our retreats, after seeing hundreds of people go through, ties back to an emotional or more of an existential theme. And so it manifests as a physical symptom or potentially more of a mental health symptom, but it's just tying back into a repressed emotional issue that came from some point in their lives up until that point, or more of a grandiose of, what am I doing with my life? Where am I going? Right? What purpose? And I mean, this just also highlights the nervous system really is kind of just documenting the story of your whole life. Like, your brain is the result of every single event that has ever happened to you from like pre-birth, like from conception to the present day. And so it just forms this operating system. And if there's kind of glitches in there because of whatever has happened to us, big or small, it will then affect how we operate in the world. And the brain just wants to keep us safe. It's always looking for threats, because that's what makes us as humans incredibly adaptable and has enabled us to take over the planet. We've got this incredible brain that will pick up these threats, but it doesn't necessarily make you happy. Or if we get too lost in that sort of threats looking up world, we end up with the consequence, which is more of a physical manifestation of the symptom. And so, yeah, I think out of anything you do here at health, just really understanding that and really just understanding yourself better is the best starting point.
Yeah, I got a picture in my mind of just like two people digging a hole, and one person is digging out, but the other person is putting, dirt in the hole, like two people. And that's kind of what it's like. I'm imagining as we're talking about this, and I'm thinking that's kind of the picture I get of someone trying to really heal, with the supplements or whatnot, like trying to fill in the hole, but the nervous system is just taking it all back out.
Yeah. So the supplements and the best foods, you can't fully digest them because, again, when we're in that fight state, the blood isn't going to the digestive system to digest. It's not where it's needed at that time. So just when I was a child, I couldn't really digest food. That's most likely what was happening. It doesn't matter what I eat or what supplements I try and take.
Yeah. As you were talking about the brain, I was thinking, well, this could really even play into like traumas that people have had throughout their lives. And, if they haven't addressed those and really sought healing in those areas, how that could play into their overall health as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's just such a direct connection between our emotional health and physical health. What's the quote? What the mind represses, the body expresses. And so there's things that we haven't dealt with Even if we've acknowledged it, it hasn't been fully processed. It is stored there, and it does tend to come up. And this is where the mind-body connection can be very powerful. And like I say, one of the biggest takeaways from the program is also how disconnected, I think, in general, these days we are from our body, because we're so focused on our minds. Our minds are our tool in this information worker age. We're not really even using our bodies that much. But a lot is stored there. A lot of whatever traumas we've experienced, like one of the modalities we use is called tension release exercises that actually works to release the adrenaline. So it like activates the body's natural mechanism to release adrenaline. That's just stored from these experiences that we've had in our life. And it just shows like how much can be stored physically. We don't have that awareness of. And then our rational mind is also be processing a very small amount of our deeper memories. And so a big piece of working on these emotional issues is getting more into the subconscious. And the only way to actually process that well is to be in an environment that feels sufficiently safe. Like the body has to feel safe to be able to even open up and lower the defenses and get more of an insight into what's happening there in the subconscious. And so there are limits to things like talk therapy. It can be very helpful, but so people can go for 10 years yet not really fully process what's going on. So most of it's kind of in there in the subconscious, or maybe not even verbal. It can't really be rationalized. And so within the program, that is a big piece of how can we really create deep safety in the body, and then provide these different modalities to be able to kind of unleash what's there. No idea what was there.
Yeah.
It's just, I just bloat it all the time.
Yeah.
Actually, it's just a lot. There's more of a root to it.
Yeah. That's brilliant. Hey, Daily Wellness listeners. If you are enjoying the podcast, would you take a minute to leave a rating or review wherever you are listening? I created this podcast so that more people could have easy access to naturally minded health info, and ratings and reviews really help us expand our reach. So thank you. I want to talk more about some of the things that you guys do to really work on and start addressing these nervous system issues. But before that, just for clarity's sake, because I think we touched on it a little bit, but what are like the long-term impacts of having a dysregulated nervous system? Like if we just ignore it and never, intentionally work on the health of our nervous system, what have you seen as some long-term impacts of that?
I'm not sure if they'd be specifically documented as being related to just nervous system dysregulation, but because of the cascade effect of nervous system dysregulation, for example, if we're seeing like a chronic stress response because of being in that activated sympathetic state, we'll often see very high blood pressure. And so that can then lead to more cardiovascular issues. Also, get into that activated state, cortisol increases. It increases levels of sugar in the blood. So over a long period of time, that can actually lead to more metabolic disorders. A big piece is the effect on the gut. So again, emphasizing the mind-body connection. There's the vagus nerve, part of the nervous system. It directly connects the gut to the brain. I mean, the gut is called the enteric nervous system. It actually has about between 100 and 500 million neurons. So it's another brain, as well as your heart, the three brains. But basically so that it can send information. So a lot of information goes from the gut back up to the brain. And so again, two-way street, if we're dealing with a lot of stress, we'll see a shift in the gut biome. And just like if we're eating bad, processed foods or taking certain medications, or that stress response is prolonged, we'll see a dysbiosis in the gut, which then has an effect on mental health. So you can see a lot of anxiety, depression. Obviously, over time, that can lead into much more severe conditions and potentially even suicide. And then the long-term effects of lack of sleep, fatigue, and just going. It's often more of a nervous breakdown where the body will just shut down, and it's called the dorsal vagal state in polyvagal theory, which is where it is just shut down, and it's almost like a numbness. And so at that point, it does take more work to get back to a regulated state. But absolutely, the consequences can be very serious. And to the point of injury, if we're just getting constant muscle tension, a lot of back issues are actually deeper emotional issues. And so it can lead to chronic pain, inflammation, and tying back in with the gut, if that, so gut dust dysbiosis lasts a long time, we can actually see autoimmune conditions. So it gets pretty serious. And the medical literature most likely wouldn't tie that directly back to nervous system dysregulation, but all of those things can trickle down.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's very serious, but just also just the impact on quality of life. If you're just running with chronic pain, fatigue, inflammation, brain fog all of the time, it's just not a very pleasant existence.
Yeah, that's good. As I feel like I am just beginning to learn about this, to be honest. I know that I have a problem like regulating my stress and my cortisol. And so I've just been seeing that connection, to my nervous system, and just starting to pay attention to that and think about that more and be intentional about that. And as I am doing that, I'm realizing how countercultural or counter societal you really have to be to have a healthy nervous system, because of the things that you've already mentioned. We all kind of know that, especially like the American diet is extremely unhealthy, right? And you have to go against the grain to eat healthy, right? And so I think this is another example of that. If we can start to open our eyes to the realization of our way of life, our pace of life, our approach to work, and things like that is also extremely unhealthy. And if we want to have a healthy nervous system and be different than everyone else that is having all these health issues, then we're going to have to, again, go against the grain and have a different way of life, and that's not easy to do. So I would love to hear your tips. Like, where should someone even start with exploring this and trying to do better?
Yeah, it definitely can be hard, and especially around the chronic stimulation. We have these days which it just gets harder to get into that rested state. But there are many things you can do, and some are pretty easy. It just takes a bit of willingness to incorporate it into everyday life. And so the first thing, which is the easiest and literally everybody can do it, is to breathe. And as I mentioned before, the autonomic nervous system will breathe for us. I'm not thinking about breathing right now while I talk, but what we can do is control that breath. And I'm sure everyone's seen breathwork classes out there. There's incredible breathwork classes that can elicit like a big parasympathetic response, but also potentially big insights. This is just very simple breathing. What we can include like in the morning or right before we eat, and that's just to do an extended exhale. So you can just inhale for around 2 counts and exhale for around 4 counts. And the reason that's helpful is because the exhale is actually tied to the parasympathetic nervous system. So that's our relaxation, digestion, healing. And just by being able to have that luxurious long exhale, it's enough to send a signal of safety to the body. Because when we're in the sympathetic nervous system state, we usually have a shallow, rapid breathing because we're getting ready to move, react, whatever we need to do. And so a lot of people will just be in that mode all of the time and may not even be aware that they're shallow breathing. Some people struggle to even take in just a deep breath.
I've been there. I have been there. I at points when my anxiety was so out of control, I was like, I might have to go to the hospital because I literally feel like I can't breathe. And so now that I can breathe, every time I can take a deep breath and exhale, and I'm just like, mindful of it, I'm just so thankful because I know how amazing that feels when you have had the experience where you can't get a deep breath.
Yeah, absolutely. And so the more we can do that, the more it'll become default. So a big part of what we do is we focus on neuroplasticity, which is the brain's ability to rewire. And so whatever programming we have right now, that's our default operating system. And to be able to change that, it takes a bit of work. Just like when you're learning something new, learning to drive, learning a new language, whatever, it's very painful at first because you're just forming those neural connections. And so something as simple as breathing, just getting into the habit of doing it, and it can be as simple as like 3 deep breaths when you wake up, right before you eat is a fantastic time just to be present and into that relaxed mode to be able to digest your food better right before bed. But the more we do that, the more the body will start to do it as a default and just send that signal that actually everything's okay. Even if it is a really busy time, like that's when you need it even more. And so being able to just really extend that exhale. Something else we do on the retreat is heart rate variability training, HRV. So a lot of people might have seen this on their like Apple Watches or like Fitbits, Oura Rings, where it's measuring heart rate variability, which is a type of biofeedback where you're measuring the gap in between the heartbeat. Sounds very obscure, but it's because the heartbeat is regulated by the autonomic nervous system, and it's actually effectively showing us the balance between the parasympathetic and the sympathetic branches of the nervous system. So on the iPhone and on the Apple Watches and the Fitbit, it's just usually giving a number. And generally you want that number to be high. The higher the heart rate variability, the more vitality we have. And so athletes will use this to see when they're fully recovered to be able to come back stronger and not get injured. And I love that athlete analogy for life, where we're all going to have really difficult times in life. There's deadlines, there's children, there's like relationship struggles, there's traffic jams, whatever it is. Like we can't avoid stress and stressful situations, but we can build a bit more resilience to how we deal with them. And so heart rate variability is pretty cool because really what we want to do is increase our capacity to be able to deal with those situations. So when our heart rate variability is very, very low, it's actually a sign of a potential heart attack. That's why an Apple Watch can pick that up. It's because your heartbeat becomes almost perfectly regular, when actually you want to have irregularity in the heartbeat because it's showing that you have flexibility to adapt to any kind of given situation. And so the more adaptability and flexibility we can have, the better. And so you can actually actively up-train heart rate variability. There's a great company called HeartMath. They do some really cool studies. They actually have some fantastic studies on how emotions affect the nervous system. And so again, tying into that mind-body piece, what's really fascinating is one of the most powerful things to increase our heart rate variability and create more vitality is gratitude and compassion. And so just to be able to see that in real time, see your heart rate variability go up when you're able to get into that deep state of gratitude and compassion. And that's because it really helps you to get into the parasympathetic state. And so the more we can cultivate that, I mean, these are things we've all heard of. It's just really cool to see it in data of just not like, oh, you should be more grateful. But when you can actually really feel into it, we can also see the impact of that when we measure brain waves. For example, on the retreats, we do neurofeedback. We do make brain maps in the neurofeedback session. And so we can actually see what's happening with the brain waves. And so when we're in lower brainwave states, like the alpha and theta states, it tends to correspond to a more meditative state. And you can get through something like a compassion meditation. And again, for our brain, we want to be able to go between those different brainwave states, from being focused, from being able to have this conversation with you, or just kind of like a beta state, to getting into the alpha and theta states, which are more relaxation, and then eventually delta to go to sleep. So creating more flexibility in those states. So things like meditation can help. I was just a complete anti-meditator for a long time because I had a very, very busy, somewhat neurotic brain. And so sitting down and just like trying to meditate, I just somewhat reinforced those loops, which wasn't very helpful, was very frustrating. So something like the HeartMath, and we have no affiliations with them, but I think they're great. The HeartMath sensor is a great thing because it can actually disrupt you. It sends a little ding at you when you start dropping out of this more like higher heart rate variability state. And so it's really great for disrupting that pattern once you get on whatever trail of thought of your to-do list or whatever you have. It can kind of ding you back into getting to that sort of deeper, more meditative state. So that's a great thing. That was very, very helpful for me when I was starting out. My HRV readings were appalling. They were so low, and now they're nice and high. So it's quite cool to also see the trend and get some feedback on actually what progress we're making. So I love data. And then outside of that, there's many things that you can do also to a big goal is reducing like inflammation in the body, which it can be a big source of like a threat. It can activate the sympathetic state, the nervous system state. And so really paying attention to diet, paying attention to gut health. We do a gut reset on a program because it is so important, getting rid of pathogenic bacteria and parasites. Parasites are much more widespread than a lot of people think, and they can cause a lot of inflammation. They can sap a lot of nutrients and energy. And again, because of that two-way street between the brain and the gut, the more we can do to improve our gut biome, the not only is it important for digestion and our immune function, but we produce these over 15 neurotransmitters, and about 95% of our serotonin is produced in the gut. So when there's dysbiosis or dysfunction there, it also means our mood is not going to be great and could perpetuate anxiety and depression, which can then kind of lower motivation or increase that stress response. So I'm really paying attention to diet, which we try to just follow like a paleo style whole food diet as much as possible. And then just pay attention to how much stimulation is in your environment. And this is really hard with iPhones. I know I fall into this category, especially running a business that's always go. It's not 9 to 5. There's people there. There's a big responsibility. And so I'm like checking everything's okay at first thing in the morning, checking everything's okay at night, and then checking this and checking that, which can be quite addictive. You're kind of getting that dopamine hit. And even if it's not that, it could be being on social media and scrolling and TV shows. And this is what's cool about looking at HRV. You can actually see what state you're in during the day, like what's actually stressful. There's a company called First Beat that does 24-hour monitoring, and actually some of the Garmin watches that aren't very expensive will show you where your HRV is during the day. So you can actually see what's causing more of a stress response. For example, a big meeting at work, perfectly normal. Going exercising, perfectly normal to feel stressed. But if you're just maintaining that stress response all day and never fully getting into the recovery state, for example, when you sit down and watch Netflix at night or scrolling on Instagram, are you actually recovering? Is that still triggering that response? But creating a bit more mental space can be credible. So instead of having music on all the time or something going inward, always having an input, having a bit more space can be really powerful. I could go on with a list of about a million things that can go pretty deep. I mean, we go into all sorts of different modalities on the retreat, which, I mean, we do it because most people wouldn't do all of those things at once at home. But there's some tips that people can maybe take and implement quite easily.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to put all of your contact info about your retreats and everything in the show notes. So anyone listening who, really feels like they need help in this area, I just highly encourage you to go to the show notes and check that out, because I know for me, like, I just feel like I'm learning about this and I wish that I would have started with this, And so no matter where you're at in your health journey, this could be helpful for you. So make sure that you go to those show notes and check it out. As you were talking about all of those tips, it's just neat how you can use some of the modern technology devices to help with, kind of helping our body recover and get where it needs to be. So I thought that was really interesting. And so thanks for sharing about that specifically. I have 3 questions that I want to end with. And before we get to that, is there anything else that you really want to cover? Just anything on your heart that you'd like to share?
I could go on forever. This is a big passion project, and I love it. No, I think that's great. Yeah, probably the last thing would be, like I mentioned, the emotional and existential themes are what tend to be at the root of a lot of the physical symptoms. And so therapists can be expensive, sometimes not that helpful. I mean, I didn't personally find one that I loved, but what I found really, really helpful and is free is journaling. Again, these are things that a lot of people know about them, but if you can be very intentional with it, there's a fantastic book called The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. She recommends morning pages. I think they're quite well known, but that can be just such a good way to get a lot out of your head. So again, stress is in our body is only as big as we perceive it. So yes, it could be an incredibly stressful situation outwardly, but we can perceive it as smaller inwardly, and it will have a big effect on our body because it will reduce that chain reaction of hormones and neurotransmitters that are produced. And so often when we get that swirl of chaos out of our head, it can feel much smaller or more manageable, or we can see some steps that we can take, because often just having some agency about the situation already reduces how scary it feels. And often it's just such a great way to just process what's going on. Again, completely free. Anyone who can do it. Obviously, if you can make a bit of time, but even if it's just 5 minutes to write a page, just getting that out of your head, it can, for me personally, I noticed such an improvement in my sleep. It wasn't going around with the monkey mind at night. So that would be my last tip. But
I love that. Yes, great tip. What is your favorite go-to morning drink?
I'm actually usually pretty basic and just have water, sometimes with L-glutamine in it, which is great for helping to rebuild the gut lining. But on our retreats, we have a green juice, which is my absolute favorite. I just don't tend to make it myself, but you can very easily. It's celery, parsley, lime. We use nopal, which is actually a cactus leaf. So it's really good for the gut. It's got a similar texture to aloe vera, and then a bit of honey. And that I just love.
That sounds good. Yeah. What a good way to start your morning. And what is your favorite way to de-stress? I feel like I'm asking the perfect person for this question.
My favorite way is a beach walk with my dog. Animals and nature, for me, that's incredibly soothing. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of other things I can do from neurofeedback to training. We have something called the biomat that's incredibly relaxing. It's like an infrared mat. But probably my absolute favorite, and when I come back feeling refreshed and restored, is the beach with my dog.
And what kind of dog do you have?
Unknown to the mix, but some kind of Irish Wolfhound Poodle mix.
Yeah. I know people are going to be wondering. They're going to be picturing you on the beach, and they're like, what kind of dog am I supposed to see right now? You know?
I'm surprised she's not here. She's usually right next to me.
Yeah. And then last question is, who would you love to see as a guest on the Daily Wellness Podcast?
Probably it's got to be Andrew Huberman. He's done such an amazing job of bringing neuroscience to the mainstream, but also just really well-researched health information. And I mean, he's so focused on the nervous system and has created an incredible following of influential people. So he's done such a good job of spreading the word.
Okay, great. I'll check him out. Thanks for the recommendation. Thank you for joining us. I learned so much from you. I feel like just talking through this with you has really confirmed a lot of the things that I've been picking up on here and there, you know, that I've heard from other people's stories, or, you know, I don't know, small little articles that I've read here and there. So thanks for bringing it all together for us and helping us to have a complete picture of how important the nervous system really is. I really appreciate your time.
Likewise. Thank you for letting me share. And yeah, maybe we'll see you on a program.
Thanks for listening to today's episode on the Daily Wellness Podcast. We hope that you found it helpful for your own wellness journey. And if so, we'd love for you to leave a review. Then come back and listen for review shoutouts on upcoming episodes. For more information, check out the show notes and connect with us on our website, dailywellnesscommunity.com.